Jade.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, let's start again. Again. 3, 2, 1, action. Welcome back, gentlemen. This is the Rugby Scoop podcast. Thank you very much to our listeners. I'm joined by Vuyo. I'm joined by Jade. Hugh, I understand he'll be joining us a wee bit later. Vuyo, how are you doing? How's the weekend been?
Yeah, it's been good, but it's been very good. Enjoying some time watching the Six Nations openers. Very interesting stuff. Otherwise, it's been just a relaxed weekend. Very cold, but yeah, all good.
Yeah, no sightseeing this weekend, clearly. Jade, how's Bloemfontein? Warm as usual?
Yeah, warm as usual, bro. Warm as usual, but it's been good. Six Nations kept me busy this weekend, especially yesterday.
Yeah.
Watched all 3 games, actually. But yeah, it's been good.
Gentlemen, before we start, Jade, I want to bring this up to you, man. Rugby has a massive problem currently. Actually, it's a pandemic. I think this could be worse than COVID at this rate. The amount, or actually a huge number of mullets in rugby currently has reached extraordinary levels. How can we stop the scourge of mullets in rugby? My goodness.
Stop choosing Polynesians. Because I think they brought it on. I think our Polynesians brought on the mullets. Our Maori and Samoan brothers, they started a trend. I mean, there's a few of the guys out there that with their haircuts, I wonder, who cut your hair? COVID is done. The barbers is open. But yeah, I guess it's an image, and I guess it's part of it. But yeah, I think Joe Mahler's one is still decent-ish. If I see it.
Incredible. It's incredible. From watching the Welsh under 21s against Scotland. Hugh, we have a big problem of mullets. Talk to me.
I don't know what to do about it. I've been trying to solve it for months now, and I don't seem to be able to achieve anything. I don't know what it is. At first, I thought it might be a forfeit that they have to do, maybe a fine for something, but no, they keep seeming to do it, and sometimes they even combine it with other terrible hairstyles like rat tails or something as well. Yeah, I don't have an answer, and frankly, we need help.
Vuyo, you are lucky, my man. You're based in Russia. I don't think there's these sort of haircuts in Russia at the moment, or are there any mullets in Russia?
You'll be surprised, bud, what these kids get up to. You'll definitely be surprised. But yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. All right. Back to serious business, gentlemen. We've got a lot to cover today. There was a lot of Six Nations footy over the weekend. There was cross-border rugby. We saw Crusaders not getting thrashed, but, I mean, had a good showing, a good outing against Munster. Only lost it by a missed kick. We got Siya Kolisi and Damien Willemse visiting Amsterdam yesterday. They watched the Netherlands versus Spain game, which is actually pretty good. I mean, Sia was swamped by the public as usual wherever he goes. That's the kind of attraction he brings. But this is good for Rugby Europe. This is good for European rugby. We saw Belgium upset Portugal, who were in the Rugby World Cup just a couple of months ago, and looking at how the gap, how much of a gap they've bridged, obviously, over the European counterparts. I mean, last year, Portugal beat Belgium by almost 50 points. And now this year, at 12 months later, roughly, they've brought it down. Actually, they've beaten them by 2 points. So that's a good thing. Spain, Netherlands, similar situation. I think 2 years ago, Spain won like 48-0. Yesterday, score 2018. I mean, Spain was supposed to be in the World Cup as well. So it's really good for Rugby Europe to be in this kind of position currently. And yeah, it bodes well for what the future will bring, obviously. Yeah, Jade, what are your thoughts? I mean, of guys like Sia, Damien Willemse coming into the Netherlands as well, trying to spread the word. Obviously, I understand they were here to visit Austria or the Red Bull company, but obviously they made a pit stop in the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, no, look, it's awesome for the game to see, I mean, I think Sia is the most public figure in world rugby, and it's for him to be in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, at a game like that where there hasn't been real interest from the rest of the world, actually, besides, the playing nations or the nations playing in that competition. I think it's awesome. I think it's really something that if you want to make this game grow, especially with the World Cup coming to America in, when is it, 20 or 31, I think it's something that we're going to have to look forward to, seeing a few of our global icons in that, watching the smaller nations, and trying to help promote their game.
No, 100%. Back into the nitty-gritty business. Friday, we saw the World Cup final that everyone was hoping to have. Inverted commas World Cup, by the way. Ireland versus France, or France versus Ireland. France hosting Ireland in Marseille. French in front of the French crowd. Packed stadium, great atmosphere. But France without Dupont and obviously Ntamak and a few other players. Ireland without Sexton. Just looking at those two important components or players in this game or in this fixture. Vuyo, what could you make of the first 10 minutes of that game between the two sides? Then we can maybe build it up into the other technical details and the areas that we thought maybe France were lacking or Ireland were lacking or Ireland were good at or France were good at. Yeah, we'll bring the conversation back to you and Jade also after viewers' comments.
Yeah, I think, look, when I looked at the game, first 10 minutes, France was nowhere. I don't know what was going on with France. I think they were still very nervous in terms of how the hype of the game. And I mean, we can't forget that everyone is talking about the winner of this game would look for a Grand Slam. So it was a little bit one of those ones where France looked very nervous, and Ireland came out the blocks and they just made them defend. Pretty good tactics from Ireland. I don't know what they saw in terms of weaknesses, but most of the lineups that they got, I saw that they were going into the 13 to touchline channels, trying to free up Bundy Aki, but which we saw the first try came through that way. But other than that, I think just France were just nowhere in that. I would even call it first 20. I don't even think we saw anything. They were playing very conservative, kicking the ball, but not being accurate in their kicking. And then obviously the territory game by Ireland was brilliant.
Yeah, territory game, trying to play maybe in the wider channels of the game as well. A lot of attack coming from the lineouts, especially from Ireland. Hugh, what do you make of the fixture on Friday?
Yeah, I was surprised. Obviously, didn't expect to see that comfortable of a victory for Ireland. We all thought it was going to be a very, very close game. Most people were giving it to France based on it being at home in France. But yeah, credit to Ireland, the intensity and the thing that really, for me, sets Ireland apart and what puts them only on a level with South Africa is the amount of detail in their game. That, if you look at something like the defenders beaten by their forwards. So every forward in their starting team has got like 2-3 defenders beaten. And that's because of their agility as they're going into contact. They're not a big team. So this whole thing about you need the size to compete. Ireland aren't big by any measure compared to other teams. But their agility and their intensity and the speed at which they play, that's what wins them the collisions. That's what wins them the gain line. And then if the roles that these players have, again, is similar to South Africa, that everyone in that team knows exactly what they've been doing. And they have that continuity from Leinster coming through. And then they can throw into it the experienced guys like Conor Murray or Peter O'Mahony or other people further back. And there's no hesitation with them. They are 100 miles an hour for the full game. And France just weren't ready for it. I felt like France were expecting a bit of an easy win. I don't know whether that's complacency that some of the Toulouse and Bordeaux players have picked up after being so dominant in Europe. I don't know if that's how it works. But yeah, just emotionally and psychologically seemed off from France to me. Like they weren't ready for that fight, and Ireland came at it in exactly the right way. We said you can't let the French build up a lead or get some early scores. So Ireland were like, okay, well, we're going to dominate the early stages. And that's what they did. And France were left scrambling for it, and their skills deserted them at times in the game. So it was really surprising to see. So, yeah, I still think these two will be clear. I still think France will be easily the second best team in the Six Nations. But what a shock. What a shock it was.
Oh, big statements, you, after such a worrying performance, for lack of a better word, from France. But we'll come back to that again. Jade, I mean, the line speed integrity from the Irish team, putting the French backline and most probably their halfback as well under immense pressure. I mean, they couldn't get away from anything. They couldn't get their normal style of play into the game because of the pressure that Ireland was putting them under. I mean, in that first half, they only first visit inside the Irish 22 was on the 40th minute. Just goes to show how well defensively Ireland had prepared for this game. But your thoughts, overall view of this particular game?
Yeah, a few points. Obviously, Ireland had a breakdown, were awesome as usual, but Ireland started fast. And I mean, how many times in the last 4 years have we said, no, Ireland came out of the gates, sprinting, and Ireland started fast, because that's what they do. What helped them was the continuity that they got from the Leinster plays in that team. I think that they settled down, and they were familiar with each other. First game, first heat out, but they were familiar, and it was they just started like they left off last year bar that quarter final. I think if you look at the way the selection calls that Farrell made with charting Joe McCarthy instead of James Ryan, I think he meant that Byrne were the two best players on the field. At lock, they both were brilliant, and the way they started the game, they put France under pressure. They bossed the breakdown, and they caused France to lose discipline, and that's why we saw that 2 yellow cards from Paul Willemse. And France giving away penalties as well for Ireland capitalizing. Every time they got in the red zone, they capitalized. You might be able to help me on this, but I think Ireland's still at 90% when it comes to, or 95% when it comes to lineouts on the 5-meter drive in the red zone. So they always score from there. They have a 95% try conversion ratio, and that's just how clinical they are. Everybody in this Ireland team knows exactly what their role is. They know exactly what to do. I think Jack Crawley was awesome. I think he added his own flavor to the number 10 jumper, different to Sexton sometimes. He took the ball up. He delayed his pass. We saw with the break that David Byrne hit for the try. Yeah, it was awesome. They didn't miss Hansen, who was, let's be honest, Hansen's been their second playmaker in that backline. They didn't miss him at all in this game because they were brilliant. For France, for one, their lineouts were nowhere. They reached Ireland's 5-meter, or they had a lineout in the 5-meter for Ireland a few times, and then they lost the ball. I don't know, is that because Paul Willemse was on the field, and then if you're looking at Gross and Aldred on the hill, tall timber, they're not really that tall, but Olivon and the other lock is relatively tall. But all Ireland did was they just sit with O'Malley, McCarthy, and Byrne in front of their two pods, and they knew, right, so let's force him to throw somewhere else. Let's just disrupt him at line-out time. So, and Ireland won a lot of ball at line-out. France scrummed a little better, but for me, there was no continuity from France in this game. Dante was nowhere, Fiku was nowhere, Mofana. I don't know why didn't they start Bale Beret. I think he was one of the form wingers in the top 14 and in the European competition, and he formed a combination with Pinot. So I think there's a lot of questions that Gauthier has now. He can look at it, setting his team up and maybe look at, bringing in a few new fresh faces. The question I have to the rest of the panel is, are you guys in favor with having a lock, 145 kilograms lock, a big ball runner, and then it can bite you in the backside like we saw with France, having big locks, but not that many line-out options, You do dominate in one facet, but you're not dominant at line-out time or at ruck time, that's also another thing we need to have a look at, because it's clear evident that France is going that route, having that big lock, 145 kilogram lock.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because from my perspective, or from what I also noticed, was the way France struggled to adjust to the quicker pace from Ireland. The heavy bodies are a bit slow in getting up from the ground, finding their position on the defensive line. So hence, Ireland could easily move the ball past the wider channels, also trying to avoid a bit of Dante pilfering or jackling if they played directly to him or towards his area or position rather. But yeah, from my perspective, the whole notion of having big heavy players, you need to play a certain structure. You need to play a much slower tempo game, because I mean last year or the year before, France were quite quick off the deck because obviously Dupont was there, and they got quick recycle. But now it seemed a bit slower, maybe half a second slower, which made it easier for Ireland to defend. Like I said, the integrity on line speed from Ireland was impeccable. I mean, they really shut them down. The ball, I don't think I even saw Fiku touch a ball a few times. I mean, in that game. But the heavy bodies approach, they need to really have a look at it. Yes, you might be effective in the maul, you might be effective at scrum time, but if you hardly have any scrums, then you're just running around, right? And you get tired easily as a heavy body in the game. But I don't know what Vuyo and Hugh maybe think about this particular aspect.
Yeah, for me, I think, look, it all depends on the kind of player that you have in terms of ball carrying player, skillful wise, in terms of that. I think it all depends on how you look at it as a coach. And if you look at France, I mean, we look at La Rochelle with Skelton. They quite use him quite well. They use him quite well because he takes a lot of contact in terms of ball carries. And then if you look at what France was doing, I was not impressed at all when Tuilagi just came on. He was at the back line in the line after they were skipping him, which doesn't make sense to me. Whereas you could have used him to suck in a couple of defenders. We call it a 3v1 or a 2v1 where one ball carrier is taking 2 or 3 players to tackle him to free up space somewhere else. They didn't use that, and I was disappointed at that. And I think that's why it probably feels like, with Jade's question, it probably feels like they're not using him the right way. They're not using him the right way, although they have a good. I think they have a good forward pack, and also, I mean, at the end of the day, that's why he's there. He's there to free up a couple of ball carries from Dante, free up a couple of ball carries from Fiku. So it does get a little bit. I don't understand how it gets to the point where you're not using those ball carriers properly. Yeah, Jade, go ahead, bud.
I think Scoop just got DC there. But yeah, so my point on Tuilagi as well is, I don't know, France needs to realize and decide where do they want to use him. Because obviously, making your international debut at the age of 19 ensures that you are talent. But we've seen in South Africa, we've seen, and we can have honest conversations about Frans Steyn. Did we get the best out of Frans Steyn? Did New Zealand get the best out of Jordie Barrett and Rico Ione, who made their debut at 19? Did Australia get the best out of Jordan Pafaya, who made his debut at 19? So it's a similar category where they need to look at with Tuilagi, his developmental era. Where can we use him? Are we going to use him at 5? What kind of player is he going to be? Can we maybe try and use him at 8? Let this guy lose about 15 kilos or so. Try and build him into an 8-man. He'll be solid at 8, you know. He'll be perfect for test match rugby at 8, and it allows you to play another lock that jump. Okay, it's difficult to drop Aldred at the moment, but I mean, going forward, they need to look at Tuilagi and see where we can use this guy, because he's clearly a talent. We will be world class, but just watch that he doesn't slip through the radar. We've seen other guys make their debut at 18, 19 at international level. I mean, George North is another one for Wales, where it's just they just haven't become that, top 5 player in the world that we expect from them when they make an international debut at the age of 19. So that's something, a valid point of Tuilagi. Are you going to use him at lock? How are you going to use him? Like you said, we can use him in the back line to take over and to create space, to suck in defenders. Yeah, I'm fine with that. But are you going to use him? In what aspect of the game are you going to use him? How are you going to develop this guy? So it's just something that, with all the hype that is there, France need to be careful of his development.
Very, very valid. Very valid. I think you also brought up another aspect. Speaking of heavy bodies, obviously, understanding the trend from 2019 to date, where South Africa have used quite a lot of heavy bodies previously, and that kind of changed the way they do things regarding selection or in the squad or in the team of 23, doing 6-2 split, doing 7-1 split. Now we're seeing the trend starting to pick up. I mean, looking at how Ireland set up, they had a 6-2 split in the bench, right? I mean, they got a lot. South Africa has received a lot of flack from the North a bit. Matt Williams, without mentioning any names, but looking at that dynamic of teams wanting to put out big players and also changing their selection so that it suits their plan. But are those big bodies then able to handle a quick pace game, settling back on defense? I mean, are they using them correctly for those particular games? And also, how much of an impact does 6-2 or 5-3 split have with regards to these selections? I would put this one out for you guys.
So I'll come in because I messaged you a bit about this, Scoop, the other day. So I like the 6-2. The reason that I say that is because I don't really see at the moment, and the way the game currently is, a need for an outside back on the bench. Because if you look at the versatility that players have, most outside centres have played wing professionally. Obviously, most fullbacks can play wing, and a lot of 10s can play fullback. In fact, most fullbacks these days are fly halves. If you look at Willemse or Barrett or whoever, or at least they've played a significant amount of fly half. Ramos is another example, has been playing fly half all year for Toulouse. So with that amount of covering that you can have, I don't really see the point of having a winger on the bench. Like Rio Dyer was on the bench for Wales all of last season. And Rio Dyer is a class player, and I think he's well worth his place on the pitch. But for me, if I'm looking at what do Wales have, we've always said in Wales that we've got loads of back row forwards. We've got loads of flankers. We've got absolutely no problem with them. Well, why not capitalise on that strength and have more on the bench? And then you talk about the box. What's their strength? Well, their strength traditionally is the forwards. Of course, we know that the box have a load of world-class backs as well these days. But why not capitalise on a strength that they have? And now we're seeing Ireland are going that way. France are going that way. And I think it's just more of an advantage to tactically be able to bring on these fresh forwards. And also, if one team's doing it, it's kind of like an arms race and everybody has to do it. Whereas if you're bringing only 5 fresh forwards up against 6, and then you're also bringing on like a winger as well, I don't necessarily see the benefit of that personally. So for me, if I was Wales coach, I'd be going 6-2.
Fair. And also, if you're a Wales coach, you need to consider age, right?
We can choose between young and very young, so yes.
Jaden or Vuyo, do you want to chime in here on this one before we move to the next topic?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just jotting down the teams from yesterday and looking at the 6-2 splits or from Friday. And let's be honest, guys. When you have a 6-2 split, you need to identify who are the guys you want in your championship round. Let's forget what the Boks did at the World Cup now, because the way they did it, in the semi-final, in the final, there was a few guys there that, on a normal day, you wouldn't have seen Etzebeth being replaced. You wouldn't have seen certain players being replaced. But because they were running out of gas and because of the route to the final they had, they did it differently. But on a normal game or a normal day outside of the World Cup, they wouldn't have done it like that. So if you're looking at Ireland, for example, okay, so who is their world-class players in the pack that can't be replaced? So you're looking at Dennis Bird, Galen Doris. Those are the two. I think Van der Vlees slipped a little bit off the radar. So those are the two guys you can't replace. So you need to look at, okay, my 6-2 split is pointless having another lock on the bench. Then I'd rather go with 2 flanks and 1 lock, because then I'll have Ryan replacing McCarthy, and then 2 loose forwards, to replace Peter O'Malley and then Van der Vlees. In the backs, I believe that you have to let your Flav play all game. You can have a utility back on the bench, but for me, if your Flav is your quarterback, he's your driver, he plays whole game for me, unless, you had a situation where a few years ago where you had Bowden Barrett coming off, but he played fullback, and Dan Carter, for example, something like that. But I mean, Dan Carter, those years played the whole game. But I believe your Flav plays whole game. So that's where your 6-2 split goes. You need to have somebody that can play, like you said, utility, that can cover Flav if something's going bad. You scrum off on the bench, and then a utility back, one back that can play center or wing. So that's where it's going. But I still believe certain tests, you pick your horses for courses. So this game, Ireland against France, they were wary of the French big pack they were bringing in. There was all talk of this pack weighing over 1,000 kilograms. That's why they went 6-2. However, if they're playing against England and Wales or the rest of the other teams, besides South Africa, I think they'll go back to a 5-3 because that's their strength, So it's your game situation. But with 6-2, you just got to be careful. You just got to know who are you guys in the pack that you want to replace and pick it around that, because I would rather want Stanley Bird on the field in the last 5 minutes than on the bench if I was Ireland.
Which is why we saw Tui Polotu finish at flank for Scotland. So it's exactly valid what you guys are talking about. But it just depends, like we're talking about here. It just depends on your mix of your team and obviously the luck of the luck of the coin when you're in the game.
Fair. Now moving on to another exciting match at the Principality Stadium. Loved the anthems, beautiful atmosphere. I think after 40 minutes, everybody had already written off Wales. I'm sure Hugh must have switched off the TV by the 40th minute, and then probably switched it on 30 minutes later. But nonetheless, looking at Warren Gatland selecting a very, very young Welsh side, 21 years of age, captain, right? I think the average age for that team, Hugh, what was it? Must have been 20, 22.
It was 25, apparently. It wasn't down at 20. Apparently it's 25.
Wow.
I'm trying to think who the older guys would be. Maybe Nick Tompkins, Owen Watkins been around for a little while, Ryan Elias. I think there's a couple of guys in there dragging the whole group up.
Fair enough. But yeah, take us through the thought process of what is currently happening in Wales. Warren Gatland going with a very young team. Is Wales trying to build into the next World Cup and 2031 at this current point? But I mean, what is the thought process of having such a young team at the moment? Or are there a lot of injuries that are currently setting Wales back into settling for a younger side?
So yes, Warren Gatland is working to 2027. Now, to be completely open, I don't like this whole 4-year planning, build for the World Cup thing, because I think you can't build for a World Cup because there's so much of it out of your control that it's ridiculous. And second, I think it devalues every other game that's not at a World Cup, so I don't like it for that reason. Anyway, so yes, Warren Gatland and indeed the entire of the WRU work on a 4-year cycle, and they manage players from the national team down to regional level based on a 4-year cycle. What we have now is a significant number of young players coming through, because that's what we've got to choose from, because Wayne Pivac, when he was in charge of Wales, did not move on the older players like Alan Wynne-Jones, like Ken Owens, maybe less so. Jonathan Davis was one that shouldn't have continued past 2019, and a few others as well, Dan Lydiot. So Gatland was forced to kind of just do a hard reset, and then you also had players like George North were unavailable in the game. Gareth Thomas as well, the starting loosehead, was unavailable. Will Rowland would have started, but he had a baby over the weekend, so he was unavailable because of that. So it's probably less experience than Gatland would have liked to go with. But then, I think with the first half, I think what happened in this game is that they went out with a game plan. The game plan was a mixture of didn't work at all and was badly executed. And then from like 45 minutes onwards, the players just went, screw this, and just chucked the ball around. And you have to remember that Scotland were down to 14 players for half of the second half. So with Tuipulotu in the bin, for example, Scotland conceded 2 tries. Now, for me, I'd be interested to hear what other guys think of this. I think your 12 is potentially the worst player for you to lose to a sin bin because it affects your defence so much. And I think that's shown in a lot of games that I've watched. And in this game, like I said, Tuipulotu went off and Wales scored 2 tries. It was nice, and it would have been quite funny if we'd have won. And it was nice seeing them throw the ball around. But let's be real, that can't be the plan every week. We can't come out next week against England and say, that works then, so we'll just chuck it around in this one and we'll just go out there and see what happens. Like, for example, Sam Costello, who went off with a HIA on 35 minutes, kicked the ball 6 times. His replacement, Johan Lloyd, came on the pitch and kicked the ball twice in the 55 minutes he was on the pitch. So that's fun, but it's not going to work every week. So as much heart as people will be taking from the fight back, I think it plasters over the problems. And I would say, don't criticise the players in the first half. Well, criticise them a bit for not executing well, but for me, it's Gatland who needs to answer the questions about his game plan in the first half.
Yeah, Gatland said this was the worst 40 minutes I've ever seen in my whole rugby experience. Vuyo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, I think you're spot on in talking about the coach's game plan. But I think also it could be that because of the team are so young, watch how much confidence they have in that game plan. And also, look, if you're talking about periodization in terms of building and targeting certain 4-year plan or a 4-year period, you do still have to think of performance in terms of when you would like to perform. I think this Six Nations is probably one of those where for Gatland, they don't really care where they come in terms of that top 3. I think they would look at obviously games where they were targeting. They targeted the Scotland game. They'll probably target Italy as well. But I don't think they'll be sad if they lose to Ireland, lose to England, or lose to France. I think with this young group, what they're trying to do is probably build the confidence. Yes, they did throw the ball around, but it was good to see that the players take confidence in that. For me, like we've been talking about it in terms of the first half, they just allowed Scotland to dictate everything. They literally allowed Scotland to dictate everything. A couple of bad passes, 1 or 2, just made them bad decisions. 1 or 2 made them just look very average. In terms of just Scotland, I think Scotland, after the yellow card, they sat back. I don't know why they sat back. They started making a lot of mistakes. That discipline let them down. I think so. The amount of considered penalties that they got against that put them in the corner, and obviously with the confidence of Wales chasing the game, that brought the live wire and the adrenaline within the game. But it's going to be tough if you're going to continue like this, playing against the big 3 of the Six Nations, of course. But look, they've got something. They've got a platform now. They've got something to build from. So they can start talking about the confidence, talking about how we can play. Although they played half of that game with 14 men, I think there was a couple of minutes where they were actually even 13 players on the field. But it doesn't matter. It's what you can build from here. And that's what coaching is about. And that's what, obviously, international rugby is about. So for me, I saw a lot of Finn Russell affecting the game a lot in the first half, but he sort of after the Duane Vermeulen try, he sort of fell apart. So I think just one of those things where he is a big player, and if his influence in the game has been shut down, then the attacking team loses that momentum.
Yeah, I think I also noticed a fair bit of that as well. I think first half, Finn Russell was really dictating play. He was like a conductor, basically um, directing how directing how and where the game should be played, and they played a lot of the footy basically in the Welsh half. And then after that first try in the second half, I think, yeah, like you said, Scotland took a step back, and then obviously the pressure started to come in, hence the yellow card, and then hence we saw Wales starting to score tries once things opened up. I think I agree with you, Hugh, here with regards to losing a number 12. He's like the engine room of that defensive pattern for most teams as well, right? You're supposed to be the hardcore defender in that channel. You're supposed to also probably organize a fair bit of the defensive lines and also some line speed to cut off the teams from spreading the ball wider, etc. But I think, yeah, having lost to Polotu in that with that yellow card, then it opened up a bit of channels for Wales to kind of start running into. Hence, they could throw the ball around and felt confident in throwing the ball around as well. Hey, Jade, I almost called you Egg. Jade, yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, look, if you're looking at the 4-year cycle and the way Gats is looking at it, he's maybe thinking, okay, in this 4 years, I just want to get miles on the clock and just learn from situations. Now, obviously, it's been successful in South Africa, the 4-year plan going to a World Cup. But for Wales, is their outcome, and realistically, will they ever win a Rugby World Cup in the next 4 years? I don't think so. But yes, other plans and goals in terms of that. If you look at the game yesterday, I mean, the first half, I'm not going to talk too much of the first half. Scotland were brilliant, Wales were rubbish. But the second half, they came back. And just 1 point down to make on this is, if Gats goes back and reviews the game, I'm sure he'll tell the guys who watch most coaches do, listen, yeah, let's forget about the first half. We all knew we were crap in the first half. We know where we went wrong. But let's look at the second half. We became back in the game where we wanted to be. We wanted us to be a close game. And we're 1 point behind Scotland. We have a penalty in our half, and we kick to touch. We get a line out in the 22, 4 minutes left, and we missed a line out. So that for them is where they need to look at, It is moments like that in the game that can cost you a game. And for a young team, a young Welsh team, that is the learnings that they'll need to take from the game. I think Wainwright yesterday was brilliant. So was Dyer. I think Williams coming on from the bench was brilliant as well. But I mean, Wales needs to look at this if they're gonna move forward, and especially. I don't think they would want to lose again next week against England. They would want to beat England next week because that game is personal. So going into the game next week, they'll really look at it and where they really lost this game after coming back into the game. Because it was there. They could have won it at the end. Win that line out, set up, build and get a penalty, go into the lead and seal out the game. It would have been a complete different story. Scoop, is it?
I'm 100% here, lads. I'm 100% here. Looking at a youngster like the captain, I think it's Jenkins, if I'm not mistaken, Hugh? Duffett, I think.
Yeah, Duffett Jenkins.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't even have cauliflower ears, for example. That's how young he is on the pot. But it seems to me on the stat side, I mean, the guy was hitting every other ruck and making tackles like a madman. I think he has the highest tackle count, if I'm not mistaken, for this first weekend. That
17 from 17.
You see what I mean? I mean, that just goes to show you the amount of effort these boys are willing to put in. But obviously, it needs to be solidified into a team effort in order for Wales to get the results they want, and also the confidence that Vuyo and all you guys are talking about as well in terms of going forward. But what are the positives for you, Hugh, going into next weekend against England?
I'm pleased for players like Alex Mann, who came on. You can see what it meant to him when he scored his try, and what a moment for him, fully deserved. I think he's got a great chance of starting at 6 next weekend with the impact that he had. I think Tommy Reffel was excellent as well, and obviously Wainwright and Rio Dyer are getting a lot of plaudits, rightly so. I don't know. It's difficult for me to be positive because I can say, yes, we showed great heart, we showed great skill coming back, but we threw the game plan out the window, and we were just chucking the ball around against 14 men who had taken their foot off the gas. So, yeah, it's difficult to say, like, no, there's something here that we can build on for against England, because I don't think we're going to play anything like we did in the second half there against England.
Fair. All right. Sticking with you, Hugh. Looking at your other favorite team, the All Whites, the English side. Heard Borthwick coming out into post-match interview, talking about a team that had 3 training sessions. Aren't these teams have been together for the past 2 weeks. How is it possible that England had 3 training sessions going into this game against Italy? Unless the English were underestimating Italy, or there's something to this, or maybe Borthwick is spinning so that the public doesn't get too angry or too disappointed within the result against Italy. Thoughts?
I imagine that Borthwick is putting across the story that he wants people to hear. The player release rules that they've got in England, because the players aren't centrally contracted, and it is very much clubs versus union in England. And in the World Cup, for example, they had like multiple iterations of their World Cup squad because they didn't have access to all of the players who played in the later stages of the English Premiership until several weeks after the World Cup camp had started. So I don't know if I believe 3 training sessions. Maybe he means 3 rugby sessions, and they spent a lot of the rest of the time in the gym, in which case that's his decision. He's the head coach. From England's point of view, you have to remember Italy took 90 points and 60 points in their last 2 games. And now they've lost to England just by 1 and 27, and they outscored England 3 tries to 2. Now, Italy were a lot better, but they struggled to get any worse. They got a new coach, brand new in. You talk about the time that Borthwick has had with these players. The Italian coach has had less, whichever way you slice it. Borthwick is clearly going results ahead of performance here. Now, one could say if you win, it's a good performance. And, maybe. But I think that's just a bit of a damning indictment of where England are, to be honest, because it's supposedly the 3rd best team in the world going off the World Cup, as so they like to tell people. You've beaten a team, like I said, that got beat by the All Blacks by 96. You beat them by 1 point, and you scored 2 tries against them. I thought Italy's defence was poor at times. I thought that the tries that they conceded were very soft. But the tries that they scored were very nice as well, and very well worked. They got Melancello in the midfield, and number 12 is absolutely class. He's going to be a sensation for a long time, I think.
Yeah.
Tommy Allen is starting to look at home at fullback. I'm not sure about Garbisi, so I'm interested to hear everybody else's thoughts on this. Garbisi's got a lot of hype from some areas. For me, he was a bit slopey-shouldered in this game. He just was shoveling the ball onto the next guy along the line. His kicking wasn't great. And he's not showing the leadership I think an international 10 needs. That's just my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. Will Italy be the happier? I guess. For me, I think England is still in the process of regressing, to be honest.
Fair. Good points, you. Very good points. I think even before we've spoken about the impact of Benetton being in the top 3 of URC and how much of that influence can be brought into the Italian team as well. But I think there was some murmurs or some comments regarding that particular aspect regarding Italy, in terms of this is getting into a more solidified effort when they choose a lot of players from the similar club, because now these players are used to winning. These players are number 2 or 3 in the URC at the moment. These players are full of confidence. And once they enter the international setup, and a majority of that international setup is from the same team, you practically bring on that same confidence onto the pitch regarding the Six Nations outing against England. Vuyo, what are your thoughts on the coaching aspect regarding this particular topic, where Benetton players are in there? Borthwick from England also said that, they've got similar players. I don't know if it's an excuse or not, but there were similar players from one team in the URC that are currently playing for them, so they're full of confidence at this point in time. But from a coaching perspective, do you also think that also has an influence going into an international game?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago about the influence of Benetton players in the Italian team. I think this was probably had to do everything with the performance of the English team, and obviously the home ground advantage of Italy. For me, I noticed one or two things with England defense. It's not great in terms of that kick chase. They do bunch a lot, and Italy spotted that, and they utilized it to their best. I mean, they tore them apart. There was one time I was hearing on the telly that the guys on the sideline were busy screaming, get your width on the kick chase. So you could see that that was a problem, and Italy did very well to spot that and obviously utilize it. I'm very happy with the coach, the way he started with the Italian coach. I mean, new guy from Argentina, he's going to bring a lot of throwing the ball around, playing with passion. So we know that they're going to be passionate, but the matter of it, can they withstand the bigger teams in terms of the competing? As Hugh has said, Gabisi I wasn't also not happy with just the way he commanded and ran the game. I still think he's got a lot of work, but now we've been talking about Gabisi now for the last 2 or 3 seasons, so I think he'll definitely need to step up there. For me, Italy won the game because Alex Mitchell did get tackled and he stood up and scored. So England were very lucky. Funny enough, you mentioned it last week. He said they tend to get 60% of the calls. So, yeah, that was one of them. But, anyway, I think, look, there's not much to take from the English team in terms of what they brought. It was similar what we saw in the World Cup, those first 2 or 3 games when they just trying to kick as much as they could. I mean, I think a couple of times Ford kicked the ball into the in goal, and lucky that it didn't roll till the end because they had a huge dead ball line. So those could have been scrums in the half of England. Yeah. So yeah, but besides that, I think the defense wasn't. I wasn't really impressed. Yes, they made a couple of dominant tackles, but defensively, if they play like that against Ireland, they should catch a 60. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Other than that, the game was pretty much one of those boring ones for the weekend.
Oof. England seemed to be involved in a lot of those, unfortunately, or fortunately for Italians. But Jade, listening to what Vuyo has said, listening to what Hugh has said as well, and then I'm also going to bring up something else for you. Felix Jones left South Africa to join England on a as a defensive coach, assistant coach. And Vuyo talks about not being happy with the English defense. Apparently, then I looked at also the English ruck speed. Apparently, it was 3 or less than 3 seconds. So maybe there are things that they're working on in terms of attack, but there seem to be some frailties when it comes to their defense. Obviously, it's to set up as a first game. We might see certain things develop as they play more games going forward. But what are your thoughts regarding this as well? I mean, Felix Jones, and obviously what Hugh and Vuyo have alluded to here.
Yeah, Felix Jones has been praised now. I've seen a lot of write-up about him from the UK press, and I'm going to give him some time for that defense. I'm going to give him some time to get into the system because, remember, Borthwick has a philosophy that differs, and it's going to take some time, for him to make his mark on that team. Gonzalo Cosado, on the other hand, how am I impressed with this coach? He reminds me of Diego Simeone, just chilled, looks classy in the box. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the best players at his disposal, but I think he's one that, might just be somebody might just all follow, just for the way he handles situation off the field and his body language in the coaching box. I fully agree with you and Vuyo on Gabisi. If I was in Italy, I would think Capuso is back. I would move him back to the to 15 and then start Allen at 10. That's what I would do, honestly, because I believe that's giving guys like that freedom, and Gabisi gets his game up again. But for me, England, nothing's really changed. Nothing is going to change overnight with this team. It's going to be the same. It's going to be Borthwick style. I think you might see England change when they tour New Zealand, and then they'll try and throw the ball around a bit, and try and be a little bit more expansive because I think that's the way they'll do it. But in the Six Nations, I don't see them going about changing things. I think what we seen yesterday is pretty similar what we're going to get with them for the rest of this tournament. Another thing, I just want to, from England perspective, I'm not too supportive or a fan of the whole style of play. If they wanted to change, if Borthwick wanted to change England this season, he could have came in with a more positive mindset towards in the game plan and changing that so that we can give a more positive imprint of England. But I mean, how are we going to change our mindset towards England? I mean, most naturally, a lot of rugby supporters around the world don't like England. And then they're playing this boring game as well. And now you have Borthwick not willing to change. He's a boring coach as well, because I mean, let's look what he done now, how he was successful. I mean, he's basically had that style of play. So yeah, I don't see things changing for them. I don't see them being a more likable team. I don't see them ever being a more expansive team. I think, that's what we're going to get with England.
Sure, Vuyo.
Yeah, I just want to throw this out to the panel. Is it the British media that's making Borthwick choose this kind of game plan? Because, for them, it's all about results. It's all about, first of all, you need to pick the best players that are performing in the Premiership and Heineken Cup, Investec Cup. That's the first two. Then secondly, you need to get results. So maybe his plan is that he's just wants to get wins. Whether how he wins, the dirty how he wins, the great how he wins, as long as they win, and that's probably something that maybe that's influenced the coach and the game plan that he's coming with, and that because we know you when you're an England coach or you're coaching in England, the British media, whether it's football, whether it's rugby, you all judge on results, and that's it. It's not about the type of game you play. It's not about being unlucky by 1 or 2 points. It's about the game you play. It's about the results. So it's that for me is something that maybe has influenced this kind of plan.
That's for Hugh, definitely.
The English media want them to play nice rugby, but they also want them to win. So I put together like a little triangle last year. It doesn't work anymore, but it's like George Ford is the 10, England lose, we need to bring Owen Farrell in. England lose, we need to bring Marcus Smith in. England lose, we need to bring George Ford in. You have to remember that Eddie Jones was effectively sacked for building for a World Cup, or at least that's what Eddie said he was doing. And everyone said, no, we need to play better rugby and we need to win now. And then Borthwick came in and got worse results playing worse rugby. So, I think you're never going to please the English press. And you have to remember that the target market of the English press is people who don't watch rugby and watch maybe 2 or 3 England games a year. That's who they're selling to. But why the English press who are in the know, and why proper rugby journalists are asking for a better or expecting a better game plan, or saying, I hope England play a better game plan, when they know all of the reasons why Borthwick doesn't do that, and they've just gotten to third in a World Cup not doing that. I don't know. So, it's just, you're never going to please the press. So if I was Borthwick, I'd shut them out. But the question is, do his bosses at the RFU above him, do they shut out the press, or do they listen to the press? Because ultimately, he's got to keep them happy. And if keeping them happy means keeping the press happy, then that's how he keeps his job.
So there it is. So we're going to see more of Borthwick in the coming years. I think they'll keep him until 2027. I don't think they will rush him. He's English after all. Maybe Lancaster. I mean, he was removed after being knocked out in the quarterfinals
Group stage.
of the Rugby World. Was it group stage?
Yeah, 2015
Sheesh.
knocked out in the group stage of their own host World Cup.
True. That is true. So in that sense, I think Borthwick, they'll try and give him some time to settle. I mean, it's only he's only been there for a year, right? 12 months into this job.
Yeah, and they paid Leicester Tigers millions of pounds for the release of him and his coaching assistants. So it's a very bad look if they sack him.
Yeah, and I can agree with that as well. All right. Something came up this afternoon, or this morning rather. It seems to be Bloemfontein related. I mean, Bloemfontein there's a South African director of rugby coming from Bloemfontein. The recent South African rugby coach who just won the World Cup comes from Bloemfontein. The director of rugby at the Sharks, former Sevens rugby coach, comes from Bloemfontein. Now, today, this afternoon or this morning, it was announced, or it wasn't announced, it's still reported as that Duane Vermeulen will be joining the Springbok coaching staff, according to Rapport. Duane Vermeulen, as we know, he was also in Bloemfontein. I think the next job for the Springboks, I think, Jade, you need to fix your CV as we speak. You are from Bloemfontein. Talk to me. Duane Vermeulen might be joining the Springboks.
They're not all from Bloemfontein. They're just educated in Bloemfontein. So I think the rugby school and the knowledge that we do get in Bloemfontein, it's, even Dan Newman as well. The scrum coach is from Bloemfontein as well. But yeah, their conditioners also from Bloemfontein. But for me, Duane Vermeulen, I don't know, guys. I'm not going to be negative towards Duane Vermeulen, but I still believe as a coach, we still need to earn our odds. I still believe that. Look, Duane Vermeulen has been a senior figure under Rassie. He has been, on the field. He's been Rassie's voice on the field. He's been carrying water. If he hasn't played, he's been, taking on the mic. Sometimes we've seen him in the coaching box. We knew this is expected that he would be joining the coaching setup and the box coaching setup. But I mean, for a guy that hasn't coached a team, I don't know, forget if I'm wrong, criticize me. But for a guy that hasn't coached a team or hasn't been coaching at any level where you earn your ropes as a coach, I mean, to be a part of the national setup, for me, I'm not in favor of that. I believe there's a difference between a player and a coach. I still believe you need to go and earn your odds as a coach, because when you do coach, you learn different aspects of the game. You learn how to handle different personalities, how to get the best out of players, how to handle different situations. It's all of that comes in. It's not just going and setting out the game plan and hoping it works, because there's certain triggers with different players, and I'm sure Vio would attest to this as well. But for me, he has a CV as a player, to be a successful coach. But I would rather have seen him being involved at the franchise level for a few years and then getting up to the box squad. I don't like, players or coaches being fast tracked. I don't like that that fast track system, because I mean, if you look at Sticks, Dion Davids, who's the other coaches that's involved there? Tony Brown is joining now. I think the defensive coach that's coming from Harlequins, they've all earned their ropes, So I'd rather have that platform to the box setup as a coach than, somebody to come out, the old player, just coming in and walking into a coaching job. I still believe that you need to earn some odds. I don't know. That's just my honest opinion. I might be wrong.
No, fair. You raised very fair points. I want to throw maybe a spanner in the works here. Rassie Rasmus plays for Cheetahs. They win their first Currie Cup in 2004. He's pretty much the tactical analyst of the team at the same time. 2005, he becomes player coach. 2006-07, now he's sitting on top of the roof without having earned the hard yards, as you put it, inverted commas. But what are your thoughts with that particular pathway
Yeah, but remember, now that's franchise level. That's at club level. That's not at the highest level. It's this difference there because there's guys that's been performing at franchise level that surely they also deserve a looking in South Africa as well. Don't they deserve a looking ahead of a guy like Duane Vermeulen where he can honestly earn his ropes at franchise level first? I have no problem, with him being in the Stormers, Bulls, whoever setup there is. I have no problem. But for me, I just feel that it leaves a bad taste for coaches in South Africa when somebody's getting fast-tracked, without real experience at the top level. That, for me, it's the difference between the franchise and then the national level.
Fair. Hugh, your thoughts on the pathway of a coach?
It's difficult because the step from club to international is so great. I think when Wayne Pivac came into Wales, he appointed a lot of former Welsh players into roles that they had never been in before. So he brought Sam Warburton in as breakdown coach. That lasted about a year before he left again. Sam Warburton had never coached before that and has never coached since. He brought Gethin Jenkins in as defence, I think, defence assistant to begin with, and then full defence coach, which I think Gethin Jenkins was always going to be a Welsh coach in one way or another. I think if you're going to be an assistant, and we saw Duane Vermeulen sat up in the box with Razzie and the coaches during the World Cup, I think it's clearly been the plan for a while. And like I say, if he's just going to be an assistant and he's got a very specific role that they want him to do, and I'm kind of okay with that. And if that's a way of just bringing a bit of continuity to a winning environment, then I'm okay with it. But yeah, to go from like head coach of a club to head coach of a national side, I think at the moment, and maybe Vuyo can give some more insight on this, it is such a big step in 15s at the moment. That's kind of why, when Eddie Jones lost the Wallabies job, it was kind of, well, who are the other coaches who are out of work? It's a bit like the bottom end of the English Premier League in football at the moment, where it's just the same people going around because there's very few new people coming into the fold, really.
Oh, that is very true. That is a very good point there, Hugh. Vuyo, I want to bring it to you, but not on particularly the Duane aspect, but on a coaching aspect regarding the pathway, regarding the differences of club footy, international footy. I mean, those aspects come into play, right? I mean, Jade also spoke about understanding the personalities of the people that you coach. Because when you're a coach, you're dealing with 40, 50 different personalities. And sometimes those are the particular aspects that might make or break you without bringing those people or failing to bring those people together or those heads together to understand a common goal and understand and obviously get a buy-in into your philosophy or into your coaching structures. I mean, I think you've also brought this up a while back or 2-3 weeks ago when we spoke about the coaching aspect. But what are your thoughts regarding these elements that I've mentioned?
Yeah, look, there's a massive jump. There's a massive difference. But I would be hypocrite if I would judge the situation because I went exactly from playing into coaching. But the good thing that I've experienced and what I had was I had a mentor who was pretty hard on me, who tried to obviously make me understand what coaching is about. So yes, in a sense, I have an issue with it, but yes, I don't have an issue with it. But the difference is going to be with the coach moving from playing to coaching. What are they going to be able to do? What kind of involvement will they able to have? And Hugh has mentioned with Sam, the same thing is that you can't just come in and think that everything is going to go the way that you want in terms of that's rosy and all of that. Everything is champagne. There's going to be tough situations, and that you're going to be faced with a lot of tough situations, with players not listening, with players dealing with the situation differently, players relating to you differently because now it's almost like a handout. You've been handed out a coach. You didn't work for it. It's almost like a handout based on what you did for your career. So those are the kind of situations that they're going to have to face, and they're going to have to make sure that they protect him in a sense where he doesn't get involved much within the game. If you remember 2016 when Stick was brought in, Tuti had a lot of issues with Stick, and Stick came from exactly the same way. Retired, coached literally 6 months, and then he was called into the Bok coaching. So it's exactly the same. He complained about how he was treating players and some of the things that he was not seeing in terms of international. So it is a little bit tricky, but if you have a good mentor, guys, which is we already know now that Rassie is a good mentor, then he can protect Duane. He can protect the role, and he can put him in a more like I call it a faded role where he's not involved much on the field, but more involved in terms of one-on-one coaching, maybe sitting with a Evan Ross, sitting with a Jesper Wiese, and just talking about how they're moving within the game, how they're dealing within the game, and rather than coming and saying, listen, you coaching the scrum this week or you taking the lineouts this week, rather than that, but rather bring in something sort of like a one-on-one mentor coaching instead of being in a team. So yeah, but look, as much as we can sit here and debate about it and say our views, the most important thing is when the job is happening. If the Boks are winning, no one's going to complain. But if the Boks are not doing well, then all of these little things will be scrutinized.
Fair. Well put, Jade.
Yeah, no, listen, my problem with this is the filter down system. So, it's like happening at the Boks now with Duane, a retired player walking into a coaching job, without real experience. Now, it might happen at franchise level as well, or at provincial level, where we might see an assistant coach at the Bulls or the Stormers. Say for the Stormers example, assistant coach retiring or, getting another gig somewhere. And then they appoint somebody that's retiring, maybe Dion Fourie, as the assistant coach. I'm just throwing out names there. Now, do we need to be really careful with this? What about the guy? What about the guy that's been coaching Hamiltons, that's been coaching the under 21s, and walked up the ranks, has been doing everything, got this level 1, 2, and 3, been getting 5 to 10 years experience? When is he going to get the job? You understand what I'm saying? When is he going to get the job? What is the plan for that guy? So we need to be careful, and we need to also have a plan in place for that. Because if that guy decides, you know what, screw this, I'm done with coaching because I'm getting nowhere with coaching now, I'm never going to get an opportunity at the Stormers, he leaves a gap at that club, and sometimes the whole can't be filled. So we need to look at that as well. There's a filter down system. It's okay to do it with 1 or 2 players, but if it's going to be come down and filter down at club level as well, then we're going to have problems with this, and we might just lose a lot of guys that put their time and effort into the game, their free time and effort, and not getting a penny for it, just for the love of the game. We might just lose these guys.
Fair point. I think a pathway system obviously we should be able to create those particular pathways where those type of coaches obviously do have a certain pathway to get to the top. But also I think the most important thing with coaching in order to get anywhere is results. If you're not getting results, it becomes a difficult road ahead. And to put your name out there or to be recognized, you really, really need to get those results as well. So we need to understand the give or take situation that we currently find ourselves in, or the dilemma we find ourselves in, that, certain aspects might hinder your progress to move up to the top. But I truly agree with you, Jade, as well, because this is a fundamental topic in terms of how do we create an overall and a transparent situation for coaches' pathways and player pathways as well to move to the top and represent their countries at the highest level. Vuyo?
Yeah, just on what Jade talked about, touched on, that's a sad reality of what do you call it, business or sport, because coaches get given a job to coach a team and they decide who to pick. And at the end of the day, ultimately, what you're saying, Scoop, is it's based on results. If he's getting the results, no one's going to care who he brought in. But it is a little bit unfair, like you guys are saying. It is a little bit unfair on the guys that has been sitting and doing his level 3s, and he's got the job and he's been at the top. And he can't even be considered for the job. The job's not even advertised. If you remember, with a lot of South African supporters had an issue with Cash being involved and he's been brought in as the SNC straight into head coaching, and the Lions took a pounding. And until they brought in obviously coaches that were being coaching at certain levels. So it is unfair, but we also have to remember it's the same thing. I don't want to call it. I might get slack for this. I don't want to call it a family business, because in family businesses, you see that quite happen often, where the son takes over as CEO, but he has no experience. But it's about the people around them. So that's basically it, the way I see it. But it is what it is until the results. Until we start seeing the results, this conversation can be null and void.
Oh, gentlemen, we can go on all evening about this, but I don't want our podcast to be over 75 minutes. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this discussion this Sunday. It's been great, gentlemen. We've dissected France versus Ireland, Wales versus Scotland, England versus Italy, Duane Vermeulen becoming could be becoming the part of the Springbok coaching staff. We've discussed mullets being a pandemic at rugby. But regardless of that, we'd like to thank all of you guys for joining us and listening in. This podcast obviously will be on Spotify in the next hour. So if you want to listen to the whole conversation, feel free to jump onto Spotify. Thank you, Vuyo. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Jade. It's been wonderful. As usual, the greatest in the business. Right? Let's enjoy some more footy. Cross-border rugby took place also on Sunday today, or Saturday this weekend, and New Zealand teams seem to have lost 1-1, outclassed by Robbie Deans. Interesting stuff happening over there. But yeah, we'll continue with the conversations. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Scoop, one last thing from me and Vuyo. Can we have a podcast and a space every time Man United plays? Because we had it now when we were comfortable, we won the game. So can we please have a space? Every time Man United plays, we're having a space.
It's a 3-0 win. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Cheers. Well done for the win.